So here's the thing, I wasn't even planning on making another video for a few more months. The most recent video I have on my channel before this one was 2 months old, and you guys are probably gonna wait a few more months. But this topic has been a circulating topic, not even just amongst my friends, just in general from what I've been seeing. If you're new here, you can understand that I am a lover of storytelling. I love stories and dissecting them and analyzing them and comparing them to other mediums across all mediums: film, literature, music, art, visual art, every sense of the word. And I've been seeing a lot of what the stories I've been consuming so far, which have been Mufasa and Wicked, the most recent movies that I've been seeing, are prequels but also sequels. I've been seeing a discourse amongst villains and the morality, and should we keep them as just unapologetically evil, or should we have them be someone we relate to? And that's what I'm gonna be talking about. I'm not sure if this is gonna be a two-part video, because depending on how far we go, I don't want this video to get too long. So if it gets too long, we'll make a part 2, but if I feel it's enough, should be fine. Again, I would not have been back if I really loved this topic, because I have my notes, as well as my notes on my journal, and I have a checklist on my notes on my iPad so that I can stay on topic. So here we go. Wait a minute, this is not new. Wait. Uh-oh. So sorry for the delay. The problem is, here we go. Okay, so the people want unrelatable characters, and the unrelatable characters that are in question are the villains. As of recently, writers have been giving villains more depth so we can feel relatable to them, but people are not really flying with that. A lot of people want a villain to just be completely evil, no context, nothing, just simply evil. It's very complicated that we want a character to feel so distant from us because of their villainy, but somehow they're misunderstood. They just need to be, you know, redeemed good and all is well with the world. But again, not everybody wants that. We have to understand that there are two sides of the story. There are people who believe that a relatable villain are mutually exclusive. Like, you cannot be relatable but also evil at the same time. And then there's another side of the story where people believe that a well-rounded villain creates a more compelling story. Now, both sides are valid. They are both understandable, because rather we have the people who believe that they're mutually exclusive to have a relatable villain. It's kind of related to our day-to-day. We can use inconvenience in our day-to-day lives to use that as a villain, just as a placement holder. There's so many things in our lives that are just unapologetically existing, and they just kind of mess up our day. You know, the people that just don't know how to drive, your alarm clock. Granted, you program the alarm clock, but the alarm clock is set to wake you up and disrupts your sleep. And for people who love and adore their sleep and their time, that can be a small bit of a villain. It's a stretch, but I'm just trying to relate this to you guys on the side who don't believe relatability should be transferred to a villain. Now we go into the people who believe that a well-rounded villain should be having their own backstory, and you can't help but do that. It's human nature to ask why. The greatest invention of all time of man is their own curiosity. Now, is it dangerous? That's another conversation. That's a whole nother video that we have to discuss, because there are two sides to that. But as we know it, we always want to know why people are the way that they are. And even if we don't have the materials to figure that out, we kind of conjure them up ourselves. If we see people that are just completely just assholes all the time, and we're like, I wonder why they're an asshole. Did they just have a bad childhood growing up? They must have woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You know what I mean? It's common for people to make up some sort of reasoning of why people do the things that they do. So it's like we can't not think of why villains are the way that they are. Some people just embrace the backstory more than others, because some people just want a brooding force to come in. And granted, once we realize that a lot of movies and their makeup are kind of cookie cutter, and sometimes it's not a bad thing, you know what I mean? We have this main protagonist that we're introduced into the beginning of the movie, and it's almost like we're holding hands with this protagonist the entire time. And once we get introduced to this big brooding force, and we're like, hey, how dare you get in the way of me and my friend's plans? How dare you get in the way of what we're doing? Whole time, the villain is probably just protecting his territory. They're just, now you're in my land. Now I need to protect mine. But since we're on context, it's all about perception. We're with the hero the entire time. So we're collecting the same morals, the same motivation, the same goals. We want to get to this side of the story, but there's something getting in the way. This is a villain now. Now, granted, we're going to talk about what I think a villain is, my best examples of what a villain is, and their traits and their archetypes, because if I make a whole list of the best and worst villains, because I'm at the worst villains as well, this would be a very long video. That would definitely be like a multiple part series, but it's gonna be fun. We have motivations based on the experiences, and said experiences depict the decisions we make. So a lot of times we've been told, if you've never gone to therapy, if you know a lot of people, if you know too many psychology majors, everyone has a certain reason why they are the way that they are, and it relates back to childhood. In my opinion, only then is when your motivation to become evil is because of your childhood, is when you become the villain, which I think is a very corny way to become a villain. Because if that was the way, almost everybody in real life would be a villain to this day. So I just feel like that's such a cheap shot. We've all had, interesting childhoods, and everyone goes home to something different. But just because you had a rough childhood does not justify that you put this hurt onto other people. And that's not even in your childhood. If you've had past experiences now, you should not be having that be like, oh, I was hurt, so I'm gonna do this. That doesn't justify, just because you've been hurt doesn't justify you being a bad person. People have a hard time with that. I had a hard time with that. I'm gonna keep it a buck, but we grow. So if you were to ask me, oh, Trin, what would you think? Would you want a villain that is unapologetically evil, or would you want one that's relatable? I think, because again, I am a person who always believes that there's never a definitive answer for anything. I think it depends on the medium. I think it depends on the delivery of the film, if that makes sense. If we have a story that's like, there's no surface level to it. If it's, back and forth, Mario Kart. When you think about Super Mario Brothers, who's the hero, who's the villain? Bowser is the villain. Bowser always wants to get Peach. Do we wonder why Bowser wants Peach? We put it together because Peach is a princess, that's it. But do we ever realize, hey, what made Bowser the way that he is? I never really cared how Bowser's backstory was. And I never really cared about all the other video game villains that I had to fight, because this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to get the villain, I'm supposed to complete the boss level, and we get 100% completion. You know what I mean? So, depends on the medium. When it comes to stories, there are some that are really reluctant on their own backstory. The most secure characters out there that have a full awareness of their self-esteem are villains, because there are some villains out there who are just morally corrupt. And do they know that they're morally corrupt? Absolutely. Like, they understand that they are completely wicked in their minds, but they are okay with that. That's why I believe villains, like the Joker, are one of the best villains ever. Because when you think about it, the Joker, he knows he's insane. He knows he has this whole cat and mouse thing with Batman, and he knows he's insane. He knows that he's crazy, and he wants to do all these things to Batman and everything that gets in his way. He doesn't care. He does not care that he's killing people. He doesn't. And he's so secure in his insanity that he inflicts that on other people. He made it to a point where he made his own psychiatrist insane and made her fall in love with him. Like that. I was gonna put that to the end, but I had to give an example that Joker is one of the greatest villains. Now, do you need to have powers to be one of the greatest villains? I don't think so. Is it a plus? Yes. Now, when we talk about power, I'm specifically meaning like magical powers, superhuman abilities. Now, we're talking about like power, like political power, power that they perpetuated in their own society. That's different. But Powers, magical powers, it adds a plus, but you don't necessarily need powers, because like I said, Joker doesn't have powers. He's just a madman. You know? Okay. We've seen a lot in media clear depictions of what good and bad is. And I think one of the best examples, this, you know how some people are like, this shows my age. I don't really think this shows my age. This just shows how much of, I don't really go outside. If you've been on here for a while, I watched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for the very first time. I knew about Western movies as my great grandpa. He used to watch them a lot. He's a big Clint Eastwood fan. And I think around that generation, they really enjoyed the Western genre, because Western films are just kind of cutthroat. They're straight to the point. Specifically spaghetti westerns. Spaghetti westerns were that like kind of homage to like Italian works, and a lot of them were dubbed. Western movies, there are clear themes in these movies. They're injustice and morality. So when we get introduced to the characters, who's good and who's bad, it comes to a point where you're even told who is bad. You're programmed to see who is bad just from the lighting and the introduction of the protagonist and the antagonist, and even, you know, old traditional Americana, because, you know, Western is like pure Americana literature, film, sorry. I mean, writing, it's still writing. The commenter in the video described that it's really hard to revive Western movies now because we're not as originally connected as the themes that they once were. People were creating Western movies solely just because like it related to what was happening in American culture at the time, but also to create this way of escapism. Most Western movies start off with this span over a huge desert that kind of acts as its own, you know, it could be any interpretation of how the story is going to go. In what the commenter I mentioned, he said it was almost acting as if it was a stage. And he also mentioned that after we got Western and, you know, past the Western genre, movies just kind of turned into other movies. Like, there's so many turning points in art, visual art of what I'm talking about now. There's modernism, there's contemporary, there is impressionism, there's pointillism, there's so many different ways of art. And when you get to, you've seen so much, it's almost as if now it's really hard to make something, because it's like almost everything has been invented. And granted, it's a great place to be, but it's a harder place to be as an artist, because whether you make something that you like and you want to pay homage to it, it's kind of, you're gonna get two different sides. It's like, hey, you stole this from such and such, oh, you're unoriginal, you have to pull from something else. It's really hard to be an artist now. There's ways to introduce old techniques into something new and to make it original. Here's my gripe with the this is the villain, this is the hero trope, because we can see that so much in not even just film, we see that in TV shows, we see that in books, we see that in a lot of things. And the problem is sometimes we often relate that to our day-to-day lives when we realize music and film and literature, they're not real life. I think villainy moves as society moves. And just how I mentioned before that, you know, a lot of things have been changing up until this point about changing the narrative of why villains are the way that they are, and why are we getting so many stories about, you know, why is Scar the way that he is now? Why is Elphaba the way that she is now? Granted, I need to give y'all a little history lesson if you guys aren't too fully into the Wizard of Oz wicked lore. L.F. Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz in 1900. Fast forward 95 years is we get The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by George Maguire. He wrote essentially what Wicked is now. So where do we get all these movies from? Where are all these places from? Let me get there. So 1900, right? Then we get 1939. We got the movie The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland. It's about 3 hours, I believe. Now we get back to 1995 with George Maguire's book. You know, times changed a little bit. It's been a little while. Now we're in 2003. The book gets picked up as a Broadway play, and now we have Wicked. So Wicked is based on the book that's based on the movie from the original Wizard of Oz. It's like, boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? Is there any relation from the two authors that wrote The Wizard of Oz and Life and Times of Wicked Witch of the West? No, not at all. But, fun fact, the reason why George Maguire named Elphaba the way that she did the way that she's named is an homage to Elif Bam, because Elif Bam's initial is LFB, Elphaba. I was living in London in the early 1990s during the start of the Gulf War. I was interested to see how my own blood temperature chilled at reading a headline in the usually cautious British newspaper, The Times of London. Saddam Hussein, the new Hitler? I caught myself ready to have a fully formed political opinion about the Gulf War and the necessity of action against Saddam Hussein on the basis of how that headline made me feel. The use of the word Hitler. What a word, what it evokes. When a few months later several young schoolboys kidnapped and killed a toddler, the British press paid much attention to the nature of the crime. I became interested in the nature of evil and whether one really could be born bad. I considered briefly writing a novel about Hitler but discarded the notion due to my general discomfort with the reality of those times. But when I realized that nobody had ever written about the second most evil character in our collective American subconscious, the Wicked Witch of the West, I thought I had experienced a small moment of inspiration. Everybody in America knows who the Wicked Witch of the West is, but nobody really knows anything about her. There is more to her than meets the eye. The story is not a prequel to it, it's just a certain bend to the story. Now people have connected the stories together as they are, like as if they were, but these are two completely different stories. If you want to continue seeing the Wicked Witch of the West as an evil person, just continue reading the books. Even though these two stories are not related to each other in the slightest, the same thing is the same. The villain is still Oz, which is another example that I'll get into much later, in a little bit actually, because we're almost done. Now, what does this say about the postmodernism critique on originality? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you asked. It's almost like you're in my head. So to talk about postmodernism, we'd have to talk about modernism, as postmodernism is a reaction to modernism. Modernism failed at a lot of things as it was severely alienated, as well as it lacking cultural relevance, and also lacked and just kind of denoted that we had any, social relevance or social dynamics in our life, in reality. Postmodernism celebrates ambiguity and understanding that there are different perceptions, and a lot of stories are contextually dependent or context dependent, if that makes sense. And we understand that some people who come from different walks of life have different truths, as other people have truths as well. Modernism believed that there was really one truth in one sphere, in one bubble. Postmodernism is like, hey, there are different sides to this story, and we can teach those things, but also have many different truths. There's an ambiguity when it comes to postmodernism. I hope that makes sense. Literature includes postmodernism in a way that we have more dynamic stories now. Everything's not cut corners. Not everything has just there's no flatness to stories now. There's always going to be something, as there's going to be a why because of this happened here, so this is why this person is this, and because of this person did this to this person, they're here, and this is why we're here in this certain position in the middle of the story. So postmodernism, in my opinion, is a good thing. Now, modernism, you can have a conversation of what you think is modernism. A lot of people have their own critiques as well. But when we think about postmodernism, it's definitely more welcoming to social dynamics, as modernism wasn't. And now we are here because I simply hated how my lip combo looked that entire time. I'm so sorry that you had to endure that for 20 minutes. You're probably wondering, Trin, why didn't you just scrap the whole thing? Because I was on a roll and I was like, okay, maybe I can get through this. And I knew I had to make another take because at that point, at the end of that segment, I had to switch out my camera and it just got worse. No, I don't have herpes. I ate. That's my problem. Food always manages to get out on my clothes or on my face. I'm working on it. I'm not a barbarian. I'm gonna check though. Okay, we're good. We're fine. So when we talk about postmodernism, right, it also acts as a way, as someone who's been in the College of Communication for so long, you understand that communication is symbolic, and the gestures and the terms that we use don't necessarily have meanings themselves. Rather, the people who have perpetuated those meanings have agreed on them collectively. So when we have those conversations of stories being told and how all of these things happen with literature, with art, with architecture, in postmodernism, these are all nuanced differences in styles. Now, what makes a great villain, right? A villain who doesn't have any flatness to them, in my opinion, it makes a great villain. A villain, like we mentioned before, someone who doesn't really necessarily have to have superhuman abilities. That's not really necessarily a thing that has to be vital as someone who is a villain, but someone, again, who is secure within themselves. And a lot of the examples that I will talk about later, or quite shortly, really, because it's hours later. I'm editing the video. I'm not trying to get too much into it and get too much into a tandem because I really want this to be one video. Just one. Now, granted, when we talk about different stories when it comes to villains, there's a reason why I still have that gripe, because we have these notions where we're told these things, and the problem is we're relating them to day-to-day life. We should not be so reluctant at seeing things as evil simply because people have said this. We need to interpret our own understandings of what these things are, because situations are objective. When we understand we're in different circumstances, we cannot generalize something based on something we've constantly been seeing in social media, guys. That's why social media can be a bit destructive, and sometimes we should take a break, which is what I'm doing. We also talk about how it's important to understand that our own meanings, we should not collectively create our own ideas simply because of somebody else, whoever the case may be, whatever sense of power they come from. Create your own ideas and make your own thoughts. Don't think because somebody else told you to. And just because people say things are bad does not mean that they are bad. There's a double meaning in there somewhere. We see perception a lot in storytelling, especially in Disney. Disney has done that ever since they bought Pixar, and Pixar has been on this constant kick of the same concept, right? Like, what if? Pixar has been able to ask us many questions. What if toys could talk? What if cars could talk? What if there were monsters under your bed? What if there was a panel of moods in your brain that could tell you how to react the way that you should for the rest of your life? What if the meteor that killed the dinosaurs missed? What if, elements were anthropomorphic and they lived amongst each other? And no one is talking about Elemental. No one's talking about that movie and how great it was and how the themes are very, very, very relevant to what we're talking about today. You're transported into this story of being a child of immigrant parents and trying to make sure that you understand the sacrifices that said parents have made, and creating your own identity because that's what the parents have sacrificed for you. And you're living in this space as Ember lives as fire, and people have made notations about how fire works and they're destructive and you can't hang out with them. Everyone has their own cities and like nooks and crannies of where to go and where you shouldn't go. And then we meet Wade, this ever-flowing, droplet of water, easing through life as he is, as water is, as serene as it is, and how fire is so destructive. These two forces come together and we understand how they can coexist and how they react to each other, and how fire can be so just apparent, just in your face. Wade is there to help Amber, and it's just like, you guys, watch the movie. Like, if you understand it, it's not just for kids, it's for adults too. Because I feel like some adults need these stories now. It makes no sense to me. Again, my battery is about to die because I was halfway in when I did this. Sorry, got a little passionate there. But what I will say is how important these stories have been talked about. We see the same message shown all the time. Perception is important. You should not judge a book by its cover. Sometimes change is good. You should love something because you love it. Crazy, there's so many double meanings in here. But I digress. We could talk about that another time. When we talk about villains, though, I have a specific reason of how I think villains are supposed to be and how I think villains, the specific level of good villains, in my honest opinion. Let's start off with a few because, again, I don't want this to be too long. Who am I going to start off with? I have a list. Okay, so last year, 2024, I started some shows. I started, what did I start? I started Game of Thrones and I started Invincible. I feel like I started another show, but those two I started, one of which I finished, one of which I'm all caught up. So when we talk about Game of Thrones, there are so many villains within that show, but who I want to talk about specifically and how we're gonna, maneuver our way into the conversation of what makes a villain really a villain. I want to talk about Joffrey. Now, Joffrey, is he a villain? Yes. Is he a great one? Sure. He's a terrible person? Yes. But this is at a point where we have to separate if they're a terrible person and if they're not a good villain because they're a terrible person. Now, sometimes they can go hand in hand because, like I mentioned before, some villains are completely in their right and know who they are and secure who they are, and that's why villains are so morally sound in their head. Like they're terrible. They can be terrible decision makers, but they know that they are. Joffrey specifically is not a good person, but the trope that I don't like seeing a lot, it can be done well, but what I don't like seeing is how some characters, they have been given this birthright and they just want to act on it. Now, in my head, is this an age thing? Because Joffrey is relatively young. So in my head, it's just like, you should not be thinking this much. You should not be having these you shouldn't be having these weird affinities towards things, towards murder. Because you're gonna be king and you should be, and stuff like that. He was put in a hard situation. Here I am internalizing and trying to humanize a fictional character. When it comes to Joffrey, given the things that he has, just because he was made king at such a young age, he was already an asshole from the jump. So he's kind of iffy when it comes to being a villain to me. Now, Cersei Lannister, that's another story. Cersei Lannister, she was taken away from her birthright, all because of gender. Because technically, I think she was supposed to be in line, but that was kind of deprived of her. She was supposed to be the queen, but the king is kind of, but Cersei Lannister and her morality, maybe that's a completely video in of itself, because that has to get digested. Because we talk about characters who are well knowing of their birthright and want to continuously live up to that, and one that has done it completely well, and one of my who I think the great villains are is Doflamingo. There's a reason why Dressrosa is actually my favorite arc in One Piece, is because you have these two stories of insanely traumatic childhoods, Law and Doflamingo. And when I talk about earlier is only then when your childhood is the reason why you become a villain, this is what I'm talking about here. It's when you become the villain, when your trauma overcomes you and you're like, you know what? I'm never gonna change from this. That's a villain. You got Doflamingo 10 tones down since he was a child. His dad was like, hey, I know that we are celestial dragons, but I don't think I want this lifestyle and this mentality for me, my wife, or my children. We gonna get out of this. And Doflamingo, being so sheltered in who he was and now being stripped to that, he's like, you're treating us like this? We're celestial dragons. Who do you think you are? Now, he's 10 toes down of who he is, and he knows what he's supposed to be and who he is, his power. And once that's been taken away, he's just been trying to gain his power back the entire time. Now that's a great villain right there. Now, Dressrosa wasn't the longest arc, but it was a great arc, and that's my favorite one. If we want to talk about arcs, again, we could talk about another video. Let me know, guys. Who else I think is a great villain is Dr. Facilier, or the Shadow Man. Sorry. People, whenever I talk about Dr. Facilier, people are like, who? And I'm like, it's the Shadow Man. It's the Shadow Man from Princess and the Frog. Sorry, y'all. Dr. Facilier, one of the many villains in Disney, one of which I'm trying to center in, because I don't think I'd be opposed to seeing a Dr. Facilier. Why is he who he is? Solely because his reasonings are kind of in the movie. Sometimes you really just have to understand why the villains are the way they are. If you have an idea, if you have a curiosity and it's not giving you anything, just really pay attention to their morals. How do they talk? How do they talk to their henchmen? Why do they do these things? What makes them tick? You know what I mean? A lot of villains quiver with fear at the fact that their power can be shifted by somebody else, and is that's their Achilles heel, that their power is being taken away. This is a power thing. Like, you don't want anybody to be better than you. Who took that from you in the beginning? So someone's been taking something from you. And you see that with Dr. Facilier. His first introduction into frame when we see the movie is his comparison of his financial means as opposed to Daddy LaBeouf. He gives this money to the newsboy just for being at the right place at the right time, simply because he has the money that he has. Literally a literal stack of money. And you got a coin just from, you know, giving somebody a cheap voodoo ritual. Dr. Facilier is a really big eat the rich person. We talk about the scene with Lawrence disguised as Prince Naveen, and Dr. Facilier is trying to, you know, he's really having a lock in moment. He talks about how, you know, the people, the rich, they've got money and they've got buckets of money, and if we infiltrate them, those fat cats with, you know, they just live off doing it. He's very envious of the rich. So it's like a, you know where his stance is, which is a very modern view of what we're living in today. So I'm gonna mix it up, and I'm gonna tell you some villains that I think are absolutely garbage. The archetype of villains, so I can like generalize majority of these villains, is the I'm not really getting my way, I have nothing else to do, so I'm going to come and bother other things. Now you're probably like, well, a lot of good villains are like that now. No. Some villains really do have a goal. I'm thinking about Gaston. Now, one of the worst villains is in the Disney franchise, actually ever in my eyes, is Gaston. Because, come on. Talk about a fragile ego. You want this woman so bad, and she has made it abundantly clear that she has nothing. She wants nothing to do with you. She don't want you. She don't like you. She hates the side of you. When she saw him at the door, and she was like, oh, this man literally paid money to have Belle's father put in a mental institution, and was like, I can get him out if you marry me. What? It's like, don't you have anything else to do? You don't have anything else to do? Why can't you go read a book? Like, why don't you just go do something else? And he has this thing where this image of me and the most beautiful girl in town have to be together to make beautiful babies. It's like, come on. This is really your agenda for the next hour and a half. I don't know. It's kind of boring. It's kind of lame. Next. Another great villain in my eyes is Spinel from Steven Universe. And if you don't know too much about the Steven Universe lore and want to get into Steven Universe, I'll give you a timestamp to skip all the spoilers right here. If not, just stay where you are. Forgive me, because I might yap about this. To introduce Steven Universe into the story, Steven Universe is one of his kind. He's the first has ever been half human, half gem. And everyone is really not sure what to do with him and how to live his life. Steven is actually unknowing of his own identity for several years, because as he sees his like moms and his dad try to figure out how he should live and so he can build his own morals, he thinks a lot of things are very easy, and if I do this, we do this. We see this a lot. If this happens, this happens. Cause effect, right? In the episode where he tries to manifest his shield and he sees that it's a shield by eating a cookie cat, which I think they should really market in real time, is not necessarily how it works. He sees Garnet, pump her fists together and her weapon is here. He sees Pearl take her spear out of her forehead and Amethyst's nunchucks out of her chest, and he's like, well, hello, what's going on? And he realizes much later that it's an internal gut feeling to when you feel these things, and he's still new to every single thing. If you're not new to this and you want to understand the story and why Spinel is a great villain, is solely because Spinel was initially Pink Diamond's force of entertainment or use of entertainment. Pink Diamond was actually rose quartz. And when we were revealed about this, now look, this is how storytelling is so great, because there was a time where before it was revealed and it was confirmed, I was like, what if rose quartz is pink diamond? And the only thing I was really going off of was that they were both pink. We didn't have anything, I didn't have anything else. I was just like, what if? But I was like, no. But I was still surprised when they found out. I was like, what? Because it just didn't make sense before. I was like, well, they're two different things, or two different bodies, or two different gems. But then I was like, wait a minute. Pink diamond can shapeshift? Now we're cooking. Rebecca was in there cooking in the studio. They need to bring that back expeditiously. Now the thing is, when Pink Diamond, she was the youngest of the diamonds. it was pink diamond, yellow diamond, blue diamond, and the infamous white diamond. Pink saw the other diamonds conquering over things, conquering over other worlds and planets, not knowing what that really meant. But she saw something and she felt that she needed to have the same thing. If this was her level of power, she needed to have the same thing too. And they didn't think she was ready at the time. But when she was, she left and she went to, they gave her Earth, right? Keep that in mind. But in the meantime, when they thought that she wasn't ready, they gave her Spinel. Spinel was the entertainment. She was this force to make her laugh, to keep her busy. That's why she has that like Steamboat Willie animation. She's just like this like lovable, bouncy character in the beginning. As she was about to go, Spinel was just like, come on, let's play. I don't know what's going on. Let's have fun. Let's laugh and let's play all these games. And this, that, and the third. And Pink Diamond was like, hey, let's play this game. Let's play this game of who can stay in this garden the longest. You stay here, and I'll come back. Spinel waited on that garden for 6,000 years. 6,000 years. Now, if we want to talk about Pink Diamond as a villain, I'm fully fine with having that conversation, because Pink Diamond, rose quartz, left all of her debt for her child to fix. And I'm like, that's a crime in of itself. Why would you do this? And the thing is, what makes Spinel even a more valid character is because she stayed true to who she was as a source of entertainment. Because the people who probably like 6,000 years, why did she leave? Why did she do that? Spinel didn't know anything else. Only thing Spinel knew was to take care of Pink Diamond and to make her happy. If she saw the smallest inconvenience with Pink Diamond, no smile on her face, the thing that she was supposed to do was turn that frown upside down. And if staying in this garden was going to make Pink Diamond happy, she was going to do that. And she did that for 6,000 years. And you want to know how she found out that Pink Diamond was no longer Pink Diamond? She didn't even know Pink Diamond was turned into rose quartz, that she shattered herself. She faked her own death because it was a controversy within the diamonds. The diamonds were like, who killed Pink? Who killed her? Whole time Pink Diamond she transformed herself into rose quartz and faked her own shattering. And how Spinel found out is in a jumbotron to the universe, a full message from Steven, like the lyrics that Spinel said in Drift Away. Yo, when this happened, the lyrics are like, finally news about how the story ends. She doesn't exist now, survived by her son and all of her brand new friends. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that cool? Isn't that cruel? And aren't I a fool to have... Y'all not listening to me. Y'all not hearing me. Because how dare Pink Diamond tell this person that is literally made to make her feel good, sacrifice herself for somebody else, when the whole time there was somebody here doing it in the beginning? Nah, that's a valid crash out for sure. Are you serious? And the thing is, when we get introduced to Spinel in the movie, one of the things was like, oh, Pink Diamond's pearl, she took you with her. Oh, interrupt. If you're someone who's fully caught up on Steven Universe and the story, and you decide to go back and rewatch the original early episodes, you get those nice feelings of warmth and seeing all these people coexist in Beach City, and Garnet and Steven find a nice loving relationship, and Pearl and Amethyst and everything like that. And you forget, Spinel's still waiting on the garden. And she's going to for a very long time. And that, hey, Rebecca, you cooked with that one. You really ate that up For real. We could talk about Steven Universe for a long time. Okay. Other than that, what else? Who else do I think is another great villain? Let me act as if I don't have my list right here. Oh. Okay, so I started watching The Boys, and granted, I know that I'm a little late to the party, but I did have an understanding of who Homelander was from like circulating things on the internet, social media, you know, the memes, everything of that nature. But when I started watching it, I'm currently on season 2, so don't ask me anything about anything farther than that. I've gotten to the point where we know that Homelander killed Madeline, and he goes to this cabin and he sees her, and I was like, okay, hold on. But I remember seeing this out of context a long time ago, and I was like, okay. But now that I see it and everything under the sun, and he has somehow infiltrated Shapeshifter into turning into Madeline as some weird kink. Yeah, if I was Ashley, I would have quit. Sometimes the money ain't worth it, for real. I think my dad's shoveling snow, so if you hear that, this mic is really good. Also, today is Valentine's Day that I record this, and he came in my room earlier and was like, "You're still my Valentine." He gave me these, and they're my favorite color, so I'll put them in a vase after this. Last couple of villains, because I got like 10 minutes left on here. It's completely chilling to see what kind of person Homelander is coming from the very first episode, because we realize Homelander isn't who we think he is, and he's very well adjusted into saving Vought and being the face of Vought, and this whole thing that he saved it and he knows what's going on. When I'm getting revealed to the fact that Vought is a pharmaceutical company, and you're just the products of Vought. He doesn't have an understanding of it. He knows how he got his powers because he was the most manipulated of all, which makes him the most damaged of all. And that's why we talk about like, oh, because of your childhood you become this person. And he tries to redeem himself when he finds out that he is a father, but he does a terrible job at it. Now, is he wrong for trying to be the father that he never had? It's hard. I mean, I don't have kids, but I understand that being a parent is inevitably hard, and being someone who has superhuman abilities, and for 8 years you never knew you had a kid, so it's like, I can't really blame him that much. But yeah, it's just, we understand what kind of person he is when that scene at the end, when he chops that plane in half. He does this to the kid because like, oh, the kid's like, is that Homelander? And Homelander's like this. Yeah, you're about to die, so this is gonna be the last thing you see. That's chilling. Last one that I want to talk about. No, there's 2 more. There's 2 more and then we're done. There's one villain. It starts with a B. No, it's not BoJack Horseman. It's actually the Beast from Over the Garden Wall. Beast is a deceiving character. What I like most about that archetype is sometimes we're heard about this specific villain and we have not seen this villain for a very long time. We keep hearing about it. So the beauty of imagination is seeing like, hey, we've been given these traits, I wonder what they look like. And when they live to the name, it's like it's chef's kiss. So when we're leading up to seeing the Beast at the very last episode, we even as the audience make ideas of who the villain is ourselves. Is the villain the woodsman? Is the villain somebody else that we haven't seen? Is the villain some other character or anything like that? In the tavern episode where Greg and Wirt and Beatrice and the horse, they are in this tavern, the people at the tavern actually believed that the Beast was the woodsman. And Wirt was like, no, the woodsman's been helping us out this entire time. And Quaker Road's Betty Boop is just like, and you're more lost than ever, huh? She actually ate him up for that, but she was still wrong. Sometimes you can have a delivery and be wrong, but you still kind of eat. You know what I mean? Beast is so many things. The beast is a symbolization of hopelessness, despair, deceit, deception, all of these things that make you submit into something. Because when we find out that the Beast has been manipulating the woodsman to keep the lantern lit because his daughter's life is in the palm of his hands, and if he cuts down the Edelwood trees for the Beast to keep the oil and to keep the lantern lit, he'll keep it. Now that's power. The power that you have to manipulate the people to keep you alive. That's villainry. The last one that I have 4 minutes to talk about is Oz, because we were talking about the wizard. Now, the Wizard of Oz, as fraudulent as he is a great villain, because like I mentioned before, you don't need to have superhuman abilities to be a super villain, right? Because when we talk about Oz has came down in this hot air balloon and could all of a sudden read the Grimoire, and now we understand why he is the way that he is. He's all great and he's all powerful. He has to have these gadgets and doodads to keep up this image. And a villain that has created a image for themselves and has perpetuated onto the people in his society so that he can do no wrong. Now that's a villain. That's a villain for sure. And a villain who is aware of their own power or lack thereof and exploits anybody who takes advantage of it because of the image that everyone else has does it. So those people can fault the person who's questioning the villain. Again, that's a villain. And Oz has done that the entire time. So it's just like, yo, Oz really did know what he was doing. He's a fraud. He's a big fraud. But is he a good villain? Sure. I'll give him that. I'll definitely give him that. Because in that scene with Wicked, when Elphaba finally finds out that he cannot read the Grimoire, and she goes, "You have no real power." And Oz goes, "Exactly. That's why I need you." What? Nah. No. Absolutely not. So those are my picks. Those are my picks for who I think the greatest villain is. And there's so much more. If you have any that you want to put in the comments, please do. If you have any other ideas and thoughts that came up in the video, feel free, so we can have a conversation in the comments. And if you guys want to have a part 2 about it and questionnaire, do whatever. Let me know. This has been fun. I'll see you guys whenever. Love you, bye. Trash people are coming. Just waiting for the people in the trash kit to get the trash and go. Please. How much do people get paid to just take out everybody's trash? That's something I never really thought about. Cause you know we all gotta eat. We all just trying to do our jobs, so I can't really get upset. But maybe I can just get a little annoyed.